Hello everyone, my name is Patrick Casey. With me is Bret Wright and Stan Hazlip. We are Pigeon Armada Studios. So first, let me introduce our team. I was the team lead, which entailed overseeing the project as a whole in regards to the game, from scripting to the asset creation and everything in between. Bret Wright was in charge of level design for the entirety of the game. He also took the role as audio lead. Stan Hazlip bug tested the game, helped build the menus, and did loads of research. Within such a small team, no one hat can be worn by a single individual. We all helped each other, and we all contributed to each area of the game. Being stretched so thin, we are grateful for the additional help students from other disciplines offered. So we would also like to thank the Full Sail students that helped us along the way. Our thanks go to the game developers Rob Taylor and Parthel Kesh for code that helped to refine our game, recording arts students Kelsey Godfrey and Patrick Flynn for making the game come alive with sound and music, to computer animator Ariel Hazlip for the Watawala model, and to our original teammates Patrick McHugh and Alex Rowland for the help in the name Watawala and the treat finding scripts respectively. Once again, thank you all for contributing to this project. We appreciate what you have done.
Hi, my name is Bret Wright, and let me proudly introduce our game, Watawala. When we chose this game, we decided the player would have a pet and it should have a name. Watawala is Swahili for element or power, which fit perfectly for a creature that can change elemental forms. The game itself is about a game designer named Jack that is supposedly going on an expedition to gather research for a new game. He is required to take a company physical, and the next thing he knows, he's waking up outside some temple gates. The first thing he encounters is this elemental creature that eats these treats. He also realizes this creature will change forms at specific elemental pursuers. Jack realizes if he throws the treats, the creature will chase them, allowing Watawala to infect the environment around them. You can see this in the tutorial. As you can see, Watawala will interact with various objects within the game. We built the game around the symbiotic relationship between Jack and Watawala. Jack wants to leave this area, but it is blocked with various environmental obstacles, and Watawala wants just more treats.
Hello everyone, my name is Stan Hazlip, and I would like to talk about coming up with the concept and creation of our game. Originally, we all submitted game ideas. We narrowed those ideas down to the 3 best ideas. After receiving feedback from the final project team, we decided to go with the Watawala based on scope and individual talents. We broke off into 2 teams, mechanics and story. Originally we were thinking physics-based mechanics in a realistic setting with emphasis on problem solving. During this time, Watawala transformed from this ball of energy to this Gengar-looking thing, but cuter. I also wanted to thank my wife Ariel for designing and modeling the little guy for us. Watawala really became the most interesting piece in our game, and rightly so, since the game centers completely around him. Actually, that brings me to the original title of our game, which was called Bewildered. As a player, Jack is kind of lost and wondering how he came to be navigating this puzzle-laden labyrinth and what Watawala has to do with it. At the suggestion of the final project team, we decided to rename the game to Watawala, since it is the star, and it's so much fun to say.
Originally, we wanted the scope of the game to include open areas where the player would travel from area to area, such as a village, an observatory, a vast jungle, and vista. Inside each area would be a large offering of puzzles the player would need to complete to trigger a jewel. 4 jewels in separate areas would need to be activated to open a door to a grand temple, which would contain the final levels of the game. Our first task was to make a level that showcased the majority of our mechanics. Because of this, we decided to start with a level the player would see about midway through the game. From there, we decided to continue working towards the last level, and then come back and complete the opening levels. Our first layouts were riddled with bugs, and had very little purpose individually. This changed in FP2, as we were tasked with concentrating on the element rather than the game. This proved to allow the individual levels to have a goal, while maintaining the overall objective.
So with every postmortem, one thing you have to address are the issues that occurred with the creation of the game, otherwise known as what went wrong, and how these shortcomings were corrected. For starters, you may notice we have 3 game designers when the typical team is about 4 to 5. Well, personal issues arose, other things happened along the way, and there was a bit of a leadership change about a quarter of the way through the project. These things happen, and getting into specifics really is needed because it has happened before and it will happen again in any final project cycle. What is important though is how throughout the process we worked as a team. Each time someone had to leave, we discussed this as a team involving all parties. We even enlisted the guidance of the final project team, and we were able to find the solutions that were best for the project as a whole and for the team members.
Allow me to bring up another issue. You see, as game designers, coding and understanding programming is a necessity, but it's not our forte, hence why there's a whole degree dedicated to it. Most of our code or scripts is work pieced together from information we found on sites like UDN, UDK forums, Herence's, and Mowgli's tutorials. They were tweaked to our needs, but without a firm grasp on scripting, it was difficult to debug. Trying to understand the scripts and debug errors was very time-consuming, of which at this time Casey was the only one that had a large amount of time. During Final Project 1, I was able to dedicate more time to the project. Stan was still working full-time, which left him about 20 hours a week to work on the project. This put a tremendous strain on Casey and I. We each were working 100 hours plus a week on this game. In one sense, this was good because the old adage, too many cooks run a pot, holds true in a project with such time constraints.
One large scope issue we ran into was the move from Final Project 1 to Final Project 2. I know that doesn't sound like it would be a major change, but with the change in instructors came a change in direction. We created 5 levels for FP1. As mentioned, they lacked some direction and were riddled with inconsistencies. There was also concern of how we were going to introduce the player to the various mechanics. So we were tasked with building 4 brand new levels from scratch that specifically focused on Watawala in each elemental form. The idea of starting all over made us sick. We had just finished FP1 where every week we had major issues, most of which were not game related. After the first week though, we started to appreciate how the level turned out. Essentially, our level now had a purpose of its own and allowed the player to become comfortable with one concept.
While we were talking about what went wrong, let's talk about our mechanics. We started with 4 elements and a few basic mechanics. We had things like bridges and destructible walls and other mechanics based on elements. As mentioned, we were hoping to have these interactions physics-based. A perfect example of this is the seesaw. This is a mechanic we really wanted to work. It involved the earth form of Watawala standing on one side to raise the player standing on the other side, up to a different height. The physics of this was a nightmare, and it worked less than 75% of the time at its best. The problem came from having to use a combination of rigid body constraints and physics assets, most of which none of us had any knowledge of. Before leaving Final Project 1, we decided to forget the seesaw and the hopes of physics-based puzzles. It was a relief to get back on comfortable ground. There was another issue similar to the seesaw that plagued us throughout this entire project, and that is the crosshairs or reticule. Much like how easy the seesaw sounds to implement, so did the reticule. As you may have noticed in the videos, there's a faint circle in the center of the screen. Typically that would be perfectly acceptable, but our projectile has a parabolic curve and therefore does not shoot to the center of the screen. This one little thing caused more problems and frustration throughout this project than all other issues combined. The game was never designed to have a targeting system. Instead, the shooting was supposed to be skill-based, something the player was supposed to improve on over time. But the Final Project team felt it was necessary and requested a reticule weekly. And here is where the problem arises. We never intended the game to have it, so we never designed for it. As solutions to make a reticule work were introduced week after week after week, they were quickly thrown out because they just simply didn't work in our levels. Each of us took a shot at getting this to work. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours spent on this. Even Rob and Parth, the dev students, and many of the faculty on the final project team tried to help us. None of us could get it to work within the existing constraints of our game. This was a great lesson to us in defining your game ahead of time, but allowing for new options. All the options won't work, but like we learned, some of them will improve the game, and some will just be learning experiences.
So I think we spent enough time talking about what went wrong. Let's focus a bit on what went right. About midway through the project, we were offered the help of the game developer students. Although they had their own grades to worry about, they did everything they could to help us. It was a relief to know that most of our code was similar to theirs and we weren't too far off base. Having the development students on board allowed Casey to step away from scripting and help in the level layout and the mechanics. This was crucial in the team development cycle because it was our first major iteration of the levels. Shortly after Rob and Parth came on, 2 recording art students volunteered to help, Kelsey and Patrick. At this point, we thought very little of the sound in the game, and the only idea that we were going for was for something more realistic. Knowing that it is very easy to be held back during final project, I can say that one thing that definitely went right for us was the dedication to the project. For Casey and Bret, there were plenty of nights that sleep was put aside in order to solve a problem or to meet a deadline. For the team, there was constant communication and a strong desire to improve and willingness to lend each other a helping hand. If we were not able to set aside our own thoughts and ideas for the better of the game, we would not be here today. It was the epiphany that we were here to graduate and not here to make the next Mario game that allowed us to go with the flow, make the needed changes, and focus our efforts towards the project.
At the beginning of this project, we set out to create the pinnacle of our portfolio. After losing team members, reassessing our GDD midway through the project, and essentially having only 2 full-time employees, we had an epiphany. We were in school and our main goal should be to learn. Yes, we were at that point. It was time to showcase our knowledge. There was no reason to quit learning. What I think we have yet to fully realize is the amount we learned along the way. The knowledge we gained from the game is one thing, but our improved team skills, our strength and friendship, and our deep glimpse into self are the real assets here. We said things went wrong. It would be more accurate to say things didn't go as planned. Maybe even that isn't the right thing to say. 3 of us set out to change our lives, pursue our passion, and become game designers. Just because the path wasn't exactly what we had pictured, the destination is the same. We're game designers,